I am honored and excited to introduce our fabulous speaker and my good friend, Ms. Sarita Washington. Sarita graduated from Temple University magna cum laude with a bachelor's in psychology and a master's of education in counseling psychology. She is an educator, author, motivational speaker with a passion for serving others, and an advocate for social justice. Sarita currently holds a position as an early college counselor at Leeward Community College, where she inspires students to exceed their own expectations for success. Thank you so much, Sarita.
Aloha, my kako. I am so thrilled and happy that all of you are here to join me today. And this is definitely an unusual setting for us to gather. I'm used to seeing all your beautiful faces and to be able to hear your voices, but I promise my style is very interactive. I was a tenured psychology professor before becoming an early college counselor here at Leeward Community College. And so expect that, as Kevin Hart says, you go and learn today. Okay, so we're going to have an opportunity to do a couple of things. We have three goals. Our first goal will be to revisit our understanding of some of the theories of adolescent development and then consider how these theoretical perspectives can inform our work with adolescents. Our second goal will be to identify some of the unique strengths and stressors specific to the early college population. And then our third goal will be to share specific strategies and best practices relevant to early college students' academic success. So before we continue, I'd like to invite you, as our plenary speaker did, to just reflect back on your own experience as a teenager. And in this reflection, I'd like for you to just take a moment and consider what are some of the words and phrases that come to mind for you when you think of your own adolescence. So what are some of the words or phrases that come to mind for you? And mind you, keep it PG. So I'd like for you to take a moment and we will make sure that you can answer this quiz. You should be able to type in the quiz now. Let's see, let's give it a shot. And if not, I'll reboot it. Okay, so folks are, yes, thank you so much for participating and for responding in the chat as well. So think back to your own experience, keep it PGs. What are some of the words and phrases that come to mind for you? And we'll give it a full minute or so. We're at 38 seconds right now. Thank you so much for taking the time to answer the poll. And I can tell you that one word or phrase that comes to me about my adolescence, I was a complete and total know-it-all. I was being raised by my grandparents and I thought that they were old-fashioned, and I thought that every dance that we were doing, we invented. So we invented the kid and play, when no, that's just kind of like the Charleston. So I thought that everything that we were doing was brand new. And, that was one of those things that really kind of was the hallmark of my adolescence, because that meant that I was also very kind of stubborn and willful, if you would. All right, so we're at the 1 minute mark. Let's take a look at what some folks have said. I'm asking you to reflect. I'm calling this poll Remember When. So thinking back to your own adolescence, what are some of and let's take a look at the results if we can. And Leanne, if you can help me show the results, that would be great. Because right now I see I have 14 participants. Is it on the screen? Let's see. Yes, I put it in the quiz so we can take a look at the results. Oh. All right. So for me, I can't see the results that you might have placed here, but I noticed that some folks said happy, some folks said confused, some folks said that they kind of were like me, where they thought they knew everything. Let's take a look. And Leanne, did you see any other results that I didn't notice as well? It's been described as a time of storm and stress in the research. That was originally one of the conceptions, that adolescence is a time of storm and stress. Lately, we found that it doesn't have to be perceived that way. That also kind of has a negative connotation to it. We're going to try this one more time, because I'd also like you to think about the essential question as it relates to goal 1, which is to revisit our understanding of some of the theories of adolescent development as it pertains to identity development. So the who are you question is a big factor for our teenagers. And so I'd like for you to consider, what did you want to be when you grew up? So think about yourself at 16. What did you want to be? Who did you want to be when you grew up? If you can take a moment to either type it in the chat box or respond to the poll, that would be amazing. And consider, are you in the career that you considered at the time? For most of us, the answer is probably no. It might be closely related. Think about what are some of the transferable skills that maybe pertain to the career you were interested in at 16 that you utilize now in your current work. If you asked me what I wanted to be at the age of 16, I might have told you a criminal defense attorney. And what I can find when I think about some of those transferable skills include communication skills, writing skills, things that I still have to use in my work today. Let's take a moment, see if we can access these results. All right, I'll end the quiz and we'll see what happens. Let's see if we can see. So I had 17 participants, and it would be very nice if we could look at the results. All right, so what we'll do is we'll try to get those results out to you so that you can also see what some of the folks that you work with were thinking at the age of 16 and what you wanted to be at that time. Most importantly here, what we're thinking about is that conception often changes. And so when we think about our theories of development, I'd like to kind of take you back to your Psych 101 refresher course. And for some of us, that's what feels like eons ago. For me, it was actually a millennia ago, which is so weird. And I'll admit that I have a bias when it comes to psychological theorists. I lean much more towards Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development and his later protege, James Marcia and Abraham Maslow, than any of the other theorists. But really, Bronfenbrenner's theory serves as a great launching point, because as you can see, the way he conceptualized our development, we don't develop in a vacuum. Rather, we develop within a system. So we develop within our system as it relates to our ohana, our neighborhood, our community. And so then when we expand that out, we would even, if I had a chance to redraw this diagram, add early college there to the exosystem and their peers in their early college classes and their professors. And then when you think about culture, the macro system, the culture in which we evolve, and then we also have to think about the time, the chronosystem. What is it like to be an adolescent in 2020? What are some of the issues that they're dealing with that may be unique to this particular cohort as it pertains to their identity development? So when we think about this, it's really this intersection of all these developmental processes that we need to think about. It's the social, psychological, biological. It helps us to develop our values, our sense of self-efficacy, whether or not we can do what we set out to do, which all stems from, again, when we think of Erikson's theory, kind of the foundational blocks that serve our development. So here we take a look at, what happens in our youth as we're growing up. We learn, can we trust the world? Are we good at the things that we set out to do? That's industry versus inferiority. So what are the opportunities that we have to show youth that, yes, when they're in middle school and when they're in, 5th grade, you're great at math, keep working at this. You're great at reading, you keep working at this. That's a feeling of industriousness that then can follow you into adolescence. And really what we're focusing on here is this middle part right here, identity versus confusion. And so the transition between childhood and being an adult, we know, is crucial. We become increasingly independent. We begin to consider careers and family and friends and really what's our place in society. And according to Erikson, this stage right here, identity versus confusion, and I'm quoting him, it exists between the morality learned by the child, which is back here, and the ethics developed as an adult, which occurs down here. And so we know that with appropriate encouragement and reinforcement, we move towards increasing independence. I'm so glad I'll be really feeling like an independent person when all of my adult children get their own cell phone plan. That's when I know I've kind of won in that arena, but definitely towards increasing independence and a stronger sense of control of self. So in some cases, according to the theory, our inability to create a sense of identity within society, there's that who am I question. I don't know what I want to do when I get older. That can lead to confusion and a poor sense of self. And then some challenges begin to emerge as a result of this. It could be feelings of insecurity, feelings of being unsure of ourselves or our future and where we fit in. And so what we want is a successful outcome of this stage. We want a sense of what Erikson calls fidelity, which is when we have the ability to have pono in our lives. So this crisis right here represents the struggle between finding a balance of having a unique and individual identity while still being accepted and, you know what it is, fitting in. How many young people really want to fit in? And so youth really have to determine who they want to be and how they want to be perceived by others. And ultimately, if we can help with this identity development, it gives us an integrated sense of self that will last, throughout our lives until we come across the next identity crisis. And so it's with this in mind that James Marshall came up with his theory that relates to Erikson's theory. It was kind of informed by Erikson's theory. And so what he said was the crises that we experience, this whole identity versus role confusion, it creates a kind of internal conflict and emotional upheaval for adolescents that leads them to examine and question their values, their beliefs, their goals. And as our youth explore new possibilities, sometimes they develop different beliefs and different values and make different choices. And so this is how they begin to form their own identity. So he says that there are 4 statuses, just as a review. There's identity diffusion, identity foreclosure, moratorium, and identity achievement. So now the good thing about this concept is it doesn't propose that every teen will have all 4 statuses. Some young people might only experience 1 or 2. And in fact, you can actually be in 2 stages at the same time. You can be foreclosed when it comes to politics. So let's say I'm a Democrat because my family are Democrats and that's just what you're expected to do in my family. That would be a foreclosure kind of way of thinking. And I could be in moratorium when it comes to my career options. That means that I haven't really committed to anything, but I'm kind of thinking that I might be interested in going into politics as a career. So let's talk a little bit about this whole identity diffusion thing. It describes a young person who hasn't really had a chance to commit to or explore any particular identity. And so it has a low level of exploration and a low level of commitment. So when you think about these young people, they really haven't considered the concept of identity at all. They may not have established many life goals, and for some people on the surface, they can appear to be kind of passively floating through life and dealing with each situation as it comes about. In the past, I've worked with many kids like this who may, know that their favorite pastime is, playing, Xbox or PlayStation, but they haven't really thought much about life after high school. The second identity status is identity foreclosure status, and it definitely represents a low degree of exploration, but a high degree of commitment. Now, think about this for a minute. These youth develop their identity simply by accepting the beliefs and values of their family and their community and their culture. So in a sense, they kind of just accept the identity that's been assigned to them for any number of reasons. And I think at this point, it's really important that we consider culture here. It's not like you have a passive acceptance for some young people. These youth are committed to values and life goals that are assigned to them, and they may just not question why they've been assigned to them, or they may not consider alternatives, or perhaps they don't even feel like they have permission to consider some of the alternatives. So we need to acknowledge that some other cultures value the needs of the larger community over the single individual. And so a mature teen might actually defer their individual pursuits and desires in the service of a group's greater good. The third status, though, is called moratorium. And this is really where the young person hasn't really committed to anything. They're just exploring lots of little things. And so this status, the youth are kind of in the midst of what we might think of as an identity crisis, but it's a good thing because it leads to exploration and experimentation and looking at different values and beliefs. And as I'm talking, if you're an instructor, I'd like for you to think about how you can shape assignments to have students address some of these issues. If you're an advisor, I'd like you to think a little bit more about some advising tactics as it pertains to this, and we'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a few moments. So these young people have not really made any final decisions about which beliefs and values that are most important to them. And so they're not really committed to any particular identity. Ultimately, what we want to have happen is identity achievement. So this is where you've explored, you've had a chance to consider other perspectives, and now you're going to say, yes, this is what I want to do. So you've decided what values are most important to you. You've thought about your life goals. You've had some exposure through a coach, a mentor, a teacher. And so adolescence is a prime time for you to explore their cultural heritage and identity during this time. They may want to learn about their family's origins. And so they may ask to be told about stories pertaining to their ancestors' history. They may question what it means to be part of their culture and the larger society. And they actually might even begin to take on leadership roles, as we saw over this past summer and this past spring with youth stepping up politically. So whether they're questioning the ways of the world or experimenting with new activities, they're always trying to assert their independence. And so we know that identity development is a process and it's a journey. So to help our youth achieve it, they'll really need us. They'll need their teachers, their advisors, their mentors to consistently serve as a guide along the way, and they need someone to walk with them as they search for their identity and go on a quest to really find who they are. And so think about this statement right here and actually ask you to respond in the chat in just a moment. Let's imagine this interaction with this student and an advisor. Let's also take a look at why the student is so lucky to have Barack Obama as an advisor. So the student says, I want to major in engineering. And the advisor says, wow, that's fascinating. How did you decide that you wanted to be an engineer? And the student says, well, I've always wanted to be an engineer. It would be easy to assume that this student is kind of a student who's in foreclosure, meaning that they haven't explored. They've just kind of decided this is what they want to do. And so they've made a commitment without that exploration. That's the definition of identity foreclosure. But in the article advising the foreclosure student, the authors note that a lot of adolescents try to minimize the anxiety caused by the crisis. So when we look at that question at the bottom, what's the benefit of identity foreclosure? You don't get a chance to explore. You've just kind of decided this is what you want to do. Think about it. What's the benefit? If somebody could put that in the chat, how could that be helpful for a young person to be in this stage? I'll give you a moment to type it in. In what way does it service the young person? Let's see if I can see. I feel like Ferris Bueller when he goes Bueller, Bueller. And what we do know is this. How can it be beneficial? Yes, clarity. I love that. Thank you so much. Clarity and approval and acceptance from family. You don't have to have conflicts with your parents if you're doing exactly what your parents told you to do. In fact, they may celebrate you. When I said I wanted to be a criminal defense attorney, they went around telling everybody in the whole neighborhood, you know how, tutus can be. They went around and told everybody, we're going to have a lawyer in the family, So at that point, you also feel like you're doing with your family, you're honoring them in a sense. And so you do feel like you have some sort of sense of clarity. I know where I want to go. But psychologically, it serves the benefit of helping you to avoid the anxiety associated with exploration. So some people attempt to resolve this crisis a little prematurely, and this is when we provide that gentle challenge to this. Now, when you get ready to challenge this gently, well, we have to think that we might encounter some resistance. Why? Because it's helpful for me to have this identity as someone who's going to grow up to be a lawyer. I may not want you to challenge that, but you might know that it could be important for me to think about or probe. So what are some of the probes that could be used next in this interaction to see if this student is in fact in foreclosure or identity achievement? What could you ask? What would be the next question the advisor would ask, do you think? So again, this is one of those interactive times. If you could type it in the chat, that would be great. What would be the next question that an advisor, or think even a teacher who, you're in office hours with a student and you're having this discussion, what could be a follow-up question to see? Yeah, thank you so much. What do you like about engineering? What brings you joy? I love those kind of questions. Yes. Both of those questions tap into something that's important for us. We need to find out, what do our students, who are they? What do they like to do? And also, when they thought about the career, what do they know about the career? So what other careers have you considered? Or what did you do to discover what being an engineer is like? Think about that question. What did you do to discover what being an engineer is like. How do you know you will like engineering? It's these kinds of follow-up questions that allow us to listen for evidence to see if the student is consciously making a decision or if they're in a period of foreclosure. So what's the challenge? This is our second goal. To identify some of the unique strengths and stressors specific to early college students. So how do we apply this to our work with early college students? Well, we actually have what some of our students have said in their own words. I love the fact that a lot of the presentations we've attended over the last day or two have utilized students' voices. I think it's so important when we're having these professional development activities that we hear from our youth, that we hear from the population that we're serving. And so I had an opportunity to survey a few early college students, and this is exactly what they said. One student said, as a teenager, I wish my professors, and this is when they were asked, what do you wish your professors understood about you as a teenager? That was their question. What do you wish your professors understood about you as a teenager? So the young person said, as a teenager, I wish my professors understood that I don't only have their class to work on assignments for. There are other classes I'm enrolled in that need my attention as well. And that comment was echoed throughout the survey. Another student said, I think that professors should understand that we might not be able to do the workload in time, even if we've signed up for college courses, because we still have high school classes and extracurriculars. Now, we'll talk a little bit about that. Other students have said that we want them to understand that we have classes and homework. And as teenagers, and I thought this was very astute, we need at least 8 hours of sleep. So high school work plus early college work leads to sleeping at 12 a.m. or later. More than one student expressed this. They talked about having to deal with early college and high school at the same time. One student says, which causes us to be exhausted in class, and very wise for the student to say, this doesn't mean we're not interested in the lessons. Interesting. Other students said, I retain more information when you're teaching it rather than me self-studying the concepts. So think about how do we change our approach, our pedagogy in an asynchronous class when much of that is self-studying. Expect that students don't understand and constantly repeat the information so we can retain it. More than one student expressed, I want my professors to know I'm shy and I like to be quiet. Someone else said, if they're going to overload us, give us preferable due date to complete everything. So multiple due dates is what they're asking for. And the student says, sometimes I truly forgot that something is due and I try my hardest to work before the deadline. So I thought that, it was great that one student commented, I want my professors to know that we're still high school students and wanting to have that experience as a teenager in high school. Someone who just wants to do early college and have good grades in both and still have some fun. So I want you to kind of keep those expressions in the back of your mind because I'm going to bring it up in the next slide after this one. When asked about academic advising and what students wanted more advising about, they said they wanted more advising about the college admissions process, how credits work and transfer works, more college-related opportunities for high school students. Think about that as we consider wraparound supports. And one student asked, what are the resources available to us as UH students? Notice that this is different from in the high school. I want to know about life after high school and the types of classes I should be taking to prepare for my future and which classes to take towards my interests. I want to know more about time management, tutoring, and studying tips and how to research stuff. And then a couple of students said, I don't know, which suggests to me that they may not know much about the role of an academic advisor on the college level. So how can we change that? So as you've reviewed the comments with me, that leads us to our third goal. What are the strengths we can see in those comments? And again, this is the participatory part of the group. I'd like for you to think about that. What are the strengths we can see in those comments? So if you would please just add that. What are some of the strengths that we can see in those comments? And if you want me to, I can back it up a little bit so you can have a chance to review it. What are some of the strengths that we see in the comments here? And I'm observing the chat just to see what you have a chance to type in. Self-awareness about learning styles, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. What are some other strengths? Yes, looking for balance. They're thinking critically about their life, wonderful. And there is this motivation to learn, even when it looks like they aren't motivated. Yeah, I was one of those professors who, if I saw a student sleeping in my class, I immediately would, mark the student absent because you're physically present, but you're not mentally present, so you're absent. Professor Washington's idea, but maybe that would have been a chance to talk to the student in office hours and really kind of uncover what's going on in their lives, that they're developing communication skills. Wonderful. So there are a number of strengths here in a lot of these statements. But now I'm going to ask you this. What are your concerns? What concerns do we have for these young people? Yeah. Yes, sleep deprivation. We've actually seen a lot of research to indicate that young people, what's happening to them biologically with regard to their circadian rhythm suggests that they should have a later time that they're waking up during the day because they do tend to stay up later at night. And it's a biological imperative. It's not just them kind of staying up to be on their cell phone, on social media. Good. The concern is that they won't like education because they might view it as too stressful, or as pointed out, the ability to manage their time, and they have different commitments kind of pulling them in multiple directions. And so we have to consider, what are the possible areas for intervention for our educators? And if we had more time to discuss, this is where I would have actually put you in a breakout room for us to consider that. We see external motivations versus internal motivations as they pursue their work. So how do we help them? And so I actually have a case that we don't have time to do today in small breakout groups, but the file will be uploaded to you and you can access it. And it is the case of Makana, who's 17. She's in 11th grade. She's already completed 24 credits in early college, and so far she's maintained a 2.7 GPA in college. Her high school GPA, though, is 3.6. And she's identified that her career goal is to become a nurse because one of her favorite aunties is a nurse, and her parents have also told her that's her expectation as well. So on the high school side, she does well in science class, quote, because they're easy. But she struggled with the 2 science courses that she's taken so far in early college. And she's currently in a science class with a lab, and she's meeting with you because she's considering dropping the course so that her college GPA doesn't drop further, since she knows how competitive it can be to gain acceptance in a nursing program. And so in academic advising sessions, she's mentioned to you that she'd love to do more extracurriculars at school, but that's hard right now because of COVID, and plus her tight class schedule doesn't give her a lot of room. Her parents worked in the tourism industry here, and they're currently unemployed. So the family of 4, she also has a brother who's 6, they've all moved into their tutu's home temporarily. And so when she's not in class, she often assists her brother with distance learning activities, since her parents do not feel comfortable with the technology. So they kind of rely on her. So you'll have access to this case as well. I would love if we could all get together and talk story about some of these things, because again, even in Makana's case, I want you to think about, what are some of the strengths that she brings to the table? What are our concerns for her? And then what are our interventions that we can use to engage her as well? And so if someone would just volunteer, and you can just put, the word and a colon after it, either a strength, a concern, or an intervention as it pertains to this student, that would be great for the sake of time. Otherwise, we would have had an opportunity, as I mentioned, to go into breakout rooms and really talk with each other about some of these things. So again, think about Makana's case. She is in high school. She's in 11th grade. She's in early college. What are some of the strengths? What are some of the concerns? And what are some of the interventions we might be thinking about with her? I'll give it like a minute. Thank you. Yes, she has some self-awareness, and she is thinking about the future. She's thinking about, hey, I can't let this GPA drop any lower. So she's concerned about her future. She's internally motivated, not extrinsically, but there's some pressure there for her for sure. What else? And as pointed out, she's obviously academically motivated. What are some of our concerns for her? We're definitely concerned about her GPA in college. I'm looking at the discrepancy between the two GPAs, wondering about whether or not she's taking on too many responsibilities. Wonderful. Thinking about, she has shared with us when she's been able to develop that relationship, working with the entire family has been great to develop support and understanding. That is a wonderful suggestion. Yes, we're worried about her level of anxiety. And so here, there's no time for her to be a teenager. When does she get to just kind of be a teen? And what does that look like? Yes, very good point. And so then this is where we start to think about our interventions. And this is pertaining to, our second and our third goal. So what does the research say that the best college instructors do? When students have struggled in their classes, they've often looked for problems within their course first, rather than thinking it was the student's lack of preparation or intelligence. What a novel idea that first I'll go back to how I'm presenting the material, the types of assignments that I'm providing for my students. When I taught developmental psychology, I was giving a whole lot of papers because, of course, one of our SLOs had to do with developing writing skills. But what I realized is that there's other ways to communicate your verbal communication skills. And so I decided to integrate assignments that utilize social media and utilize other platforms. And I found that they rose to the occasion. One student created a whole podcast about the importance of not smoking while you're pregnant. It was amazing. So think about possible potential pit stops in understanding the material. And then when you're presenting something that's odd, our presenter earlier said college is weird. It is, it's weird. So when you're presenting something that's odd or strange, connect it with something they know, connect it with the familiar. Other research has suggested that every discipline can find ways to confront students about who they are as human beings, so constantly challenging them with regard to their identity development. There's an excellent book I recommend, and it's in my resources and references page. It's called What the Best College Teachers Do or College Instructors Do. It's by Ken Bain, and it talks a little bit about some of those tactics. And then, as mentioned earlier in our plenary session, we expect more from our students, which doesn't just mean piling on the work, but work with a purpose, work with a challenge. And that expectation, there's so much psychological research to suggest that what we expect from students can actually impact their performance in positive and negative ways. And so I hope we get a chance to talk about that research later on in the future too. We do know that one instructor devised a way to address students' anxiety about being in college. She talked about it right from the beginning, from the first class at the beginning of the semester. They talked openly about what challenges they expected to face in the course. And even as we move forward, we think about their identity development. How can we provide opportunities for role rehearsal? And what I mean by role rehearsal is how can we provide opportunities for students to adopt the identity of a college student? They already have the identity of a high school student, usually, unless you're at one of our programs where the young person is graduating from 8th grade, they're going to 9th grade, and in the summer they might be taking a college class or two between that time. And so at that point, they're adopting dual identities. I'm figuring out what it means to be a high school student. I just graduated 8th grade, but I'm also figuring out what does it mean to be in 9th grade and be a college student. So how can we provide opportunities for students to engage in the behaviors of a college student? What does it mean to have a college student identity? We should get together and brainstorm about that. What does that look like? What are the behaviors we're looking for? And then how can we give them those opportunities in the assignments we create or in the advising sessions with the questions that we're asking? And yes, as instructors, you want to make it clear that this is not high school, even though your class might be taking place in a high school. And, as our presenter said earlier, there's like this magic fairy dust that gets sprinkled on students when they leave the hallway in high school and they walk into the college class. And she said, we're not sure what it is, but we really should think about it. What is that factor that will allow them to make that transition? What are the practices you have in your classroom, or what are the policies we have in our early college programs that make it clear that they're now in a college course and how awesome that is? Not how terrifying that is. How awesome is it that you're in this college classroom right now? And then using scaffolding, which we all know. Think about what are some of the scaffolding techniques you employ in your advising and also in your teaching. And I'm going to bring that up a little bit at the end as well, because this actually was shared with us in a couple of the sessions yesterday. I want our instructors to know this. Using different approaches to help students understand the material does not mean that you're lowering your core standards. So taking into account a student's developmental level and their struggle with identity and all of that, that doesn't mean that you have to make your class not as rigorous. It just means that you have to maybe change the tactic or the perspective that you're using to design your assignments. And you'll find that you'll be invigorated by this process as well. Even when we think about advising, and when we're advising the foreclosed student, some of the literature suggests that there are things that we can do, not just helping them to explore their interests, values, and beliefs, but asking those probing questions. Can you imagine any circumstance where you would change your mind if another better career choice came along? We had a session last week where they talked about developing a parallel plan, not a plan B. I love the concept of a parallel plan. Yes, I get to still work towards becoming a nurse, but I'm also working on this other plan just because this is a cool thing I'm also interested in. A plan B suggests that in case plan A fails, you'll move on to plan B. So I love this concept of a parallel plan. And then a lot of us who are advisors in the session now know about appreciative advising techniques. So many of us may not know that there is an appreciative advising inventory. So Jenny Bloom developed this idea along with some other colleagues. And so it sets the students in motion for the discovery phase of academic advising. So appreciative advising asserts that we can change our relationship with students in the advising environment by first changing their concept of what it might mean to meet with an advisor. So creating a self and welcoming space, being relatable, and then helping them to discover the awesome things about themselves and dream and design. And so I've provided you with a copy of the Appreciative Advising Inventory that you can download from the website as well. And you can see that some of the questions here allowed for you to kind of probe that student, where the student is in the discovery phase of things. And the other thing I'd like for you to take a look at is the advisor questions that are provided to you. And I've provided that to you as well. And let me see if I can just zoom in a little bit so that you can see some of the questions that an advisor might ask to help a student to see what their social competencies are, for example. So tell me about a time you made a difficult decision that turned out well. Tell me about a time that you did a great job of planning ahead. Tell me about a time that you worked together with a person from a different cultural background or racial or ethnic background. If you look at values questions, what are some obstacles you've had to overcome in life to be successful as a college student? So I'd like to challenge you. And again, if we had more time, this would definitely be a talk story kind of situation, because of what I want you to do as your homework is to go through this inventory and see what are the questions that you think relate especially well to students who are dually in high school and college. What are the things that you could ask? What are the different ways that you could probe and interact with our students when it comes to the college registration process, and making sure that we are helping them to discover themselves, that we are helping them to get to the who are you parts of their identity development. And so we do know, and I think time is coming to a close here. So when we do know this about the research, that understanding the life themes that students are coping with at various stages of development, like identity and purpose, it can help advisors create and focus their interventions with students on what should be taught during each encounter with students, rather than merely on what the student presents as questions. This changes the whole dynamic, right? Your student comes in with a question, hey, how do I sign up for XYZ class? And you're also presented with an opportunity to help them towards discovering their identity and purpose. And we do know that great minds think alike. In some of the stories yesterday, JJ Cabralda talked about the benefit of having online instruction at his high school so that he could intervene if a student was having a bad day. So when we think about our interventions and where we need to go from here, we need to ask ourselves, what college supports are available to dual enrollment students? How do we incorporate culture in early college students' identity development? When we have office hours with our students or advising hours, first of all, making sure the students even know what an office hour is. I heard of a student who actually thought office hours was the time that the professors were doing their work, not the time that they were available to see students. So ask about their life outside of early college. Like, what are your extracurricular opportunities? Even yesterday, Pokey mentioned continual self-assessment for the students, giving them an opportunity to examine themselves over and over again. Because in 9th grade, if you'd asked me, I would have told you I wanted to be an actress. By 10th grade, I wanted to be a lawyer. So continual self-assessment. And then even the students in his video, he pointed out the importance of our role in their lives. He actually said, I became who I am because my counselors stayed on me. When you're thinking about your program, ask how scaffolded your early college program is. We use Maka'ala, EC orientation. Pokey talked about how making sure that students are aware of these resources for them and making sure that we scaffold that for them as well. I do think, am I out of time? So I do think that I'm close to out of time, and there was so much more that I wanted to share with you. I do give my students practical suggestions, like make your smartphone be smart. So learning to use it as a business tool and a tool for success in college and not just a vehicle for the latest TikTok. That's part of that student identity development. So thank you so much for your time. And we've worked towards 3 goals today. We revisited our understanding of theories. We identified some of the unique strengths and stressors specific to EC. And then thirdly, we had a chance to share some specific strategies, but we do know generally that a gentle push from a caring adult and an opportunity to dream and explore and question may be all a team needs to begin that journey towards identity development. Thank you so much. Mahalo nui for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Sarita. That was very informative and very engaging. I did have one question that came through the chat, and I think you do have time to address it. Have you presented this information to early college instructors at Lever Community College? If yes, how did they respond to receive this? They're thinking that it could be really applicable to all UH early college instructors.
I have not had an opportunity to present this to our instructors there because COVID. Isn't that the answer for everything? So we had so many, ideas and plans, and then we all had to pivot and develop a parallel plan, not a plan B, for how we're going to succeed during this time. So I have not had that opportunity, but it's something I'd love to do. And actually, this area needs additional research. So if anyone wants to partner with me around research and just kind of exploring this more, I would love to do that as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So thank you for participating in this session, and a big, huge thank you to our amazing speaker. I'm going to put the link for the survey in the chat box. So unless you have pre-registered for the conversation starter session starting at 11:30, the early college convening is now concluded. So recordings of all sessions will be posted next week. You will be receiving an email once these are all posted, and any supplemental resources are available. Thank you again for joining us, and please let us know your feedback for day 2. We look forward to seeing you at the Virtual Pathway Summit in February 2021. Thank you so much.